talk to you today about what happens when you put a milky spoon into a meaty dish of food that's cooking, and to compare that to the case where you use a milky knife to cut meaty food. In all these cases that we're talking about, it doesn't make any difference if we change around the milk and the meat. It doesn't matter whether it's a milky knife into a meaty food or meaty knife into a milky food. It's all the same halacha. It works the same both ways round. But what I want to emphasize to you and show you today is the difference between a spoon and a knife, because as we'll see, there's a big difference in the kitchen between these two items. Let's say Mrs. Cohen was in her kitchen cooking a pot of meatballs with a thick tomato sauce. Her husband comes along, sees what's cooking and wants to have a taste. He grabs the nearest spoon and puts it in and takes a taste of it. And then suddenly, everyone realizes it was a milky spoon. What do we do now? What's the halacha now? A milky spoon was put into the meaty food that's cooking in the pot. So let's take this case apart. Right, we've spoken before, we've mentioned the difference between what's called a ben yomo and an eino ben yomo. That means a utensil that was used within the last 24 hours and a utensil that was not used within the last 24 hours. And we said that as far as taste that's absorbed in a utensil is concerned, where it was absorbed more than 24 hours ago, so the taste has now become stale and it's not going to osser up any food that was cooked in that pot. Let's say I have a pot, a milky pot that wasn't used for 24 hours. I cooked chicken in that pot. So we explained before in an earlier class that the chicken, even though lachatchila I shouldn't do such a thing, but the chicken soup doesn't become osser because the taste that was absorbed in the milky pot is now stale. But if I did that same thing within 24 hours of using the milky pot, I cooked my chicken soup in that pot. So now the chicken soup becomes osser because the taste of the milk that's absorbed in the pot is going to come out. It's within 24 hours, it's a ben yomo, and it's going to make the chicken soup a mixture of meat and milk, which is going to make the chicken soup osser. So the same thing's going to apply to our spoon. If the spoon that Mr. Cohen took was a spoon that is an eino ben yomo, it wasn't used within the last 24 hours for milk, hot, while it was hot. That means he didn't eat porridge with it in the last 24 hours. So now, let's take apart the situation. What's going to be with the chicken soup? The chicken soup is going to be mutter. It's going to be permitted. Why? Because seeing as this milky spoon is an eino ben yomo, the taste that's absorbed inside it is not fresh, and therefore, whatever comes out into the chicken soup isn't going to affect the chicken soup, and the chicken soup is still kosher. The pot that the chicken soup is cooking in is also still kosher, just like the chicken soup is. But the spoon itself is now going to absorb the chicken soup, because the chicken soup is hot on the fire. The spoon is going to absorb the chicken soup, and now it's a milky spoon, even though it's an eino ben yomo, that has just absorbed meat. So the spoon is going to need hagola. It's going to need koshering. It's going to need to be immersed in boiling water to get out the taste of the meat that's been absorbed into it. So that's if the spoon was an eino ben yomo, if it was not used within the last 24 hours. But what if the spoon was used within the last 24 hours? We know that the spoon was used within the last 24 hours. It is now a ben yomo. The taste of milk that's absorbed inside that spoon is a fresh taste of milk. And it's going to come out into the chicken soup when Mr. Cohen put it in to take a spoon of the soup to taste. So the first thing we need to do is to see if the laws of nullification apply here, if the laws of bitul apply here. We have to look at the volume of the spoon, because we presume that the whole spoon is absorbed with milk, and see if the chicken soup, the volume of the chicken soup, is 60 times the volume of the spoon. If it's more than 60 times the volume of the spoon, then bittul will apply here. And that means that even though taste of milk came out of the spoon, it was nullified in the chicken soup, because the chicken soup is more than 60 times the volume of the spoon. If that happens, if there is more than 60, then not only is the food going to be kosher, the pot that you're cooking in is also going to be kosher, because if the food's kosher, then the pot's going to be kosher. The spoon is going to still need koshering, because the spoon, even though there was 60 against the milk that came out of it, but now there's meat absorbed in the spoon. You have a ben yomo spoon that has absorbed chicken. That's going to have to be koshered, right? So the spoon will have to be koshered. What if you don't have 60? If you don't have 60 against the volume of the spoon, so now the food, the chicken soup, is going to become osser, because the fresh taste will come out of our spoon and get absorbed in the chicken soup. The chicken soup will now become a mixture of meat and milk. It'll become osser, and that issa will further be absorbed in the pot that it's cooking in. So now the pot is going to need koshering, and the food is a mixture of meat and milk. It'll have to be thrown out. An interesting point here, seeing as I spoke about chicken soup. So chicken soup is not an issa d'oraisa to cook with milk, because chicken doesn't. Where did we learn the issa of meat and milk from? From the pasuk of lo tivashel gedi b'chalav imo. You're not allowed to cook a kid goat in the milk of its mother. That's talking about animals that have milk and feed their children. There's an issa of meat and milk together. But with a chicken doesn't have milk. The issa of the prohibition of having chicken and milk together is da'abanan. It's a rabbinical prohibition. So even though with meat and milk you're not allowed to have any benefit from meat and milk that was cooked together, with chicken and milk that was cooked together, you are allowed to have benefit from it. So this mixture, which is now a mixture of meat and milk, if you have a non-Jewish neighbor, you'd be able to send it to them as a gift for them to enjoy your chicken soup. Because for them there's no prohibition involved at all. And even though you're going to get benefit from it, that they're going to maybe send you back a bottle of wine next week, or will send you something next week in return for the gift that you sent to them, nevertheless that benefit is allowed, because here the issa of meat and milk is only rabbinical and not from the Torah. But nevertheless, let's get back to our case, right? So if you don't have 60, the food is going to be osser, the pot is going to be osser, and the spoon is going to be osser as well, because the spoon has absorbed meat and milk together. An important point that we have to say here, though, is how, when we're measuring the volume to see if we have 60 times the volume of the spoon or don't have 60 times the volumes of the spoon, how do we measure the volume of the spoon? There are three options here. One is to look at the amount of the spoon that was put inside the chicken soup, which may just be the spoon at the bottom. The second option is to look at the whole volume of the spoon, even the part that I was holding in my hand, which if you're talking about a large soup ladle, right, it could be a large amount of metal, it could be a large amount of volume. The whole spoon by itself, or a third option is to look at the amount of the spoon that was put within the rims of the pot, where there is the steam of the chicken soup. So which of these three volumes do I take? How do I measure the volume of the spoon? Chazal tell us that I take the last option that I said. I don't look at just at how much of the spoon was put into the chicken soup, and I don't look at the whole volume of the spoon, even what was in my hand. I look at whatever went within the boundaries of the rim of the pot. Whatever went inside the rim of the pot, that's the volume that I have to take and I have to measure to see if I have 60 times or don't have 60 times. Why? Because within that rim, within that area, is the hot steam that's coming up from the chicken, and all that is affected, say Chazal, with the taste. So when I'm measuring it, I need to look at how much of the spoon of the ladle went inside the rim of the pot. So that's with regard to the spoon. Now let's look at the same situation, the same scenario with a knife. The next evening, Mrs. Cohen ordered a pizza. A big, large pizza with bubbling cheese arrived at home, and Mr. Cohen again grabbed a knife to cut up the pizza, and after he'd made the first big slice, he suddenly realized it's a meaty knife. He used a meaty knife to cut a milky, boiling hot pizza. What now is the halacha in this case? First of all, I must explain to you that there's an argument. What happens when you cut up something with a knife? We know, let's take the scenario that where the knife was a ben yomo. The knife was a ben yomo, and we now need to know whether I have 60 times in my pizza the volume of the blade of the knife, or if I don't have 60 times the volume. How much of the solid that I cut with the knife do I need to measure? So there's two major opinions. One opinion is that it doesn't make any difference how big the piece that you cut is. We presume that the taste of that knife went in the whole piece. So even though I had a whole big giant pizza and I made one cut through it with my knife, we presume that the taste of meat inside that blade of that knife is absorbed in the whole piece of pizza, the whole big round pizza. And therefore, when I have to measure whether I have 60 or not against the blade of the knife, I look at the whole pizza and see, do I have 60 against the blade of the knife or not? If I do, then the whole pizza is not now a mixture of meat and milk. It hasn't been absorbed in the whole volume of the pizza. But there's another opinion. It says that when I cut with that knife, it doesn't spread out in the whole pizza, in the whole solid that I cut, but it gets absorbed in the width of a peeling around wherever I cut. So of my large round pizza, where I made one cut from top to bottom, a slice on either side of where I cut, a slice which will be the size of a peeling, the width of a peeling. The width of a peeling, that means the width that you'd be able to cut that width and it would stay whole and not crumble up. Right? You're talking about around a centimeter, right? Maybe a little bit more. You would have to cut off that, only in that area, only that area absorbs the taste that is absorbed inside the knife in the case where the knife is a ben yomo. So we have these two different opinions. So therefore, even if the whole size of the pizza was 60 times the volume of the blade, I have to worry about maybe, and therefore the whole pizza is not going to become osser, but maybe the halacha is like the other opinion, and only just around where I cut, the taste of the meat is absorbed into the pizza, and therefore I have to check there as well if I have 60 times or don't have 60 times. And there it's much less likely that I will have 60 times, and therefore I would have to remove that peeling from each side around where Mr. Cohen cut the pizza in half. But that's going to be if the knife that was used is a ben yomo. If the knife that was used is not a ben yomo, so it would seem that there shouldn't be a problem with the pizza, because the taste that comes out of ein ben yomo, something that wasn't used within 24 hours, is a stale taste, as we've already explained a number of times. But here now comes the important difference between a knife and a spoon. The big difference between a knife and a spoon is that a knife, the way a knife is used with pressure to cut something, we say that where you have a meaty knife, there are two problems with the knife. One problem is the meat, the taste of the meat that's absorbed inside the blade of the knife. Another problem is the fat of the meat that is going to be stuck to the blade in a microscopic film of fat on the side of on the sides of the knife. And that happens whether you cut meat or whether you cut cheese. There's always going to be a very thin covering of fats from the meat or milk, which is not a taste of meat or milk, but it is actually meat or milk itself, which is going to be stuck to the sides of the knife. The halacha is that the only way to get that off is to stick the knife in the ground 10 times into hard, solid ground. That scrapes off the sides of the knife. In our times, we're used to cleaning our knives with cleaning materials and with coarse cloths and scotches and things like that, which we scrub our knives with. If you scrub a knife with some type of coarse material, and you have a little bit of soap, a little bit of detergent, cleaning materials, washing up liquid, then we can presume that you got off that fat. But if you didn't do that, then we cannot presume that that fat was taken off, and we presume that it's there on every knife. So in our case, where Mr. Cohen used the meaty knife to cut the pizza, even if the knife is an Eina ben Yomo, the fat that was stuck to the side of the knife, when we cut the pizza, and because of the pressure of the knife, when Mr. Cohen cut that pizza, is going to mean that some of that actual meat has come off and is stuck now to the sides of the pizza. And therefore, even if it was a ben Yoma, we have to get that off. The way we get that off is we have to cut all around where the cut was made by Mr. Cohen. We have to cut around on both sides. Again, the thickness of a peeling. The thickness of a peeling, again, is the amount that you would be able to cut off, and the whole thing would remain whole and wouldn't break up into crumbs. Again, you're talking about the width of about a centimeter maybe. So even in the case of the knife, it's more stringent than in the case of the spoon. In the case of the knife, because of this second problem of food, of fat, whatever it is that is stuck to the blade of the knife, so even if the knife is an Eina ben Yomo, we need to be worried about the meat that is actual meat, right? It's not a taste of meat, it's actual meat that is stuck to the pizza, and you'd have to cut off from around the sides. So what's going to be our final ruling with this pizza that Mr. Cohen cut? If the knife was an Eina ben Yomo, then Mr. Cohen is going to have to cut off a slice around the place where he made that big cut in that first cut, and the rest of the pizza the family can eat. If the knife is a ben Yomo, it was used within the last 24 hours, then the halacha is going to be that if the whole pizza is more than 60 times the volume of the blade of the knife, and here we would have to look at the whole blade of the knife, because generally when people cut, they go backwards and forwards, and so we can presume that the whole blade of the knife has absorbed. If the pizza is more than 60, then the pizza is going to be mutter. And if it's less than 60, then it's not. But even if it's less than 60, so the whole pizza is not a problem of Isra, and the family can eat and enjoy the rest of the pizza, nevertheless, that piece of a kedei klipa, of a peeling, around where Mr. Cohen cut would have to be taken off, because there you probably wouldn't have 60 times the volume of the blade. And there, we would say it will absorb the taste of the meat. So that's what's going to be the din with the pizza, and that's the difference between the knife and the spoon. One question remains for us to deal with, and that is, who knows whether that spoon or that knife is a ben yomo or an eina ben yomo? No one's following around in the kitchen to know whether I used that knife or spoon in the last 24 hours or didn't use it. You've got a whole load of knives and forks, some you did use, some you didn't use. How can you know? How can anyone be expected to keep track of that? So the rule is that in the private kitchen, we presume that every knife or fork is an eina ben yomo, was not used within the last 24 hours. That's the presumption, unless, of course, we know that it was used. But if we don't know, we can't say, I just don't know. Did I use that knife or didn't I use that knife? In a private kitchen, we would presume that it's an eina ben yomo. But in an industrial kitchen, in a restaurant, in a hotel, we would presume that it is a ben yomo, because there everything is used so much. So there we would presume, where we don't know, that it is a ben yomo, and in a private kitchen we would always presume where we don't know that it's an Eino Ben Yoma. So that's how it works. Thank you.